Sagittarius, a child you never met in this life is sending you a soul message. Sagittarius, there are certain kinds of loss that don't leave visible wounds. Losses we don't always talk about because how do you explain missing someone you never even met? How do you describe the quiet ache for a soul that brushed yours only briefly, before returning to the stars? This is a message for you if you've ever felt that kind of emptiness. If you've ever carried a soft, wordless grief. If you've ever wondered why certain days feel heavy without cause. Or why your heart whispers to someone who never had a name. This message is for those who've lost a pregnancy, experienced an early miscarriage, or have always felt the presence of a child spirit near. Even if no one else understands, there is a soul reaching out to you now, not with blame, not with sorrow, but with pure love. A soul who never got to stay long in this world, but who chose you with intention. A child whose essence still lingers in your field, watching over you, guiding you, holding you in moments of stillness. And whether this connection comes from a physical experience or simply from a feeling that won't go away, know this: their love is real, their message is alive, and their presence is a blessing, not a burden. In today's healing journey, we will walk through this invisible thread of love together, with compassion, reverence, and the deep understanding that some bonds transcend even time and birth. If this resonates with something quiet inside you, please like, share, or subscribe. You are not imagining this. You are remembering. Gate 1. The grief without a name, the emptiness you couldn't explain. Sagittarius, for all your strength, your laughter, your fire, there is a corner of your soul where a quiet ache has taken root. And the most confusing part is you may not even know why. You've had moments, perhaps in solitude or on still nights, where tears threatened to spill for no reason you could identify. You've carried a sense of something missing, something soft, fragile, unspoken. A void not carved by any visible event, but present nonetheless. And if you've tried to share it with others, perhaps you've been met with blank stares or well-meaning reassurances that never quite landed. Because this grief has no name. It doesn't announce itself with ceremony. It doesn't come with a funeral or flowers or rituals of goodbye. It's the kind of grief that lives in the spaces between things. In the pause before a deep breath. In the sudden, unexplainable longing for something, or someone, you never truly had. This is the loss of a child you never met in this life. A pregnancy that ended before it could begin. A soul that flickered just briefly in your orbit, like a falling star vanishing before you could even make a wish. Or maybe it wasn't a pregnancy at all. Maybe it was simply the lifelong sense that someone was meant to be here with you but never arrived. Sagittarius, you are not making this up. You are not too sensitive. You are not broken. You are connected to a soul who, for reasons beyond our understanding, could not stay in the physical world but who chose you still. And while others may not see the loss, you feel it. Because loss isn't measured by how long someone stayed. It's measured by the depth of the imprint they leave behind. And this soul? They left you with love. Even in their absence, they chose to wrap you in a bond so sacred it defies logic. A bond that doesn't need proof. A bond that doesn't require explanation. A bond that just is. I once held space for a Sagittarius woman named Alina. She had never been pregnant. Never experienced loss in the way the world defines it. But for years she had recurring dreams of holding a baby she never named. One who always smiled at her, always seemed just out of reach. I don't know why I feel like I've lost something, she whispered once, tears welling. But my heart grieves a child I never knew. When we explored deeper, we discovered that Alina had always wanted to be a mother, but life had taken her in different directions. The grief wasn't just for an unborn child. It was for an unlived dream, a soul connection that had made itself known in the only way it could. Through subtle visits, through feelings, through the invisible threads of the spirit. Not every soul is meant to be born. Some come into our energy field just long enough to shift us, to awaken us, to remind us that love exists even in silence. Sagittarius, your fire often burns toward the future. You seek meaning, vision, expansion. But even the most free-spirited wanderers carry soft places inside. And this child's presence is one of them. You may feel it in those fleeting moments when you sense someone near, even when you're alone. In the music that moves you without explanation. In the gentle sadness that rolls in like a wave before sleep. In the way you instinctively place your hand over your heart when you're hurting. This is not just emotion. This is connection. And yes, it's okay to grieve it. You don't need a name or a birth date to honor the love that was seated in your soul. You don't need validation to cry. This grief deserves to be held with the same tenderness we offer any loss. So if you've carried this pain in silence, let this be your permission to feel, to mourn not only what was lost, but what was never given the chance to be. To whisper, "I remember you," into the quiet. To know that the ache is not a flaw, it is evidence of how deeply you are capable of loving, even across dimensions. You are not alone in this. Spirit sees your heart. The universe holds your ache gently. And that child who never lived here in the way you hoped is closer than you think. Watching, loving, waiting for the right moment to speak to you, to say in the only way they can, "I never blamed you. I've always loved you." And that is where healing begins. Gate 2. The soul connection. You've always felt a gentle presence by your side. Sagittarius, when logic falls silent, the soul begins to speak. And for some time now, something within you has been whispering that you are not alone. That even in your solitude, especially in your solitude, there is a quiet companion walking beside you. Not in body perhaps, but in energy, in light, in presence. And maybe you've wondered, what is this feeling? It comes not with fanfare but with softness. A certain warmth that washes over you in moments of stillness. A breath of comfort when tears fall unexpectedly. A sudden pause in your thoughts, like someone is listening even when you haven't said a word out loud. At first, you might have dismissed it as imagination, but over time it persisted, grew, anchored itself in your awareness. That is the presence of a soul who chose you before they ever had the chance to meet you. You see, not all soul contracts are meant for the physical world. Some are formed in higher realms, where the heart knows no barriers and timelines blur into eternity. This child, whether they flickered briefly in your womb or were simply an essence near your field, knew you. They saw something in you. Your fire, your tenderness, your resilience. And they chose you to be the one they would love from beyond. Sagittarius, your sign is often associated with freedom, movement, and adventure. But your heart is deeper than the world gives you credit for. And in that depth, this child's spirit found a home. They come to you in subtle ways. In the quiet moments of reflection. In the breeze that brushes your cheek at the exact moment you're thinking of them. In the way a stranger's baby locks eyes with you for just a beat too long. In the dreams that you can't quite remember, but that leave you waking with a tender ache or a peaceful smile. I once spoke with a Sagittarius named Jonah. He had no known history of loss, no direct experience that would explain the recurring feeling of a young child walking beside him in dreams. "I always feel this tiny hand in mine," he said, "even though I never see a face." He'd gone through his life believing it was his imagination, until one day during meditation, he heard a single phrase in his heart, "Thank you for carrying me." That was the moment he stopped questioning and started listening. Sagittarius, your life path is a beautiful paradox. You are meant to soar freely, yet your roots are anchored in something eternal. This child's soul did not arrive to disrupt your freedom, but to remind you of what makes it sacred. The connections we carry across lifetimes, the invisible threads that hold us even as we move, and the grace of being chosen to hold space for a love that transcends form. This connection is not meant to keep you in grief. It is meant to lift you, to show you that even in what the world calls emptiness, there can be profound presence, that what appears to be absence can, in truth, be a different form of closeness. Sometimes this soul's presence brings peace. Sometimes it brings tears. Both are expressions of love. Neither needs to be explained. When your heart stirs for no reason, when you find yourself speaking to someone who isn't there, when you instinctively say, "I miss you," without knowing why, know that they hear you. And they respond, not always with words, often with feeling, with energy, with the sudden sense that everything is okay even when your mind says otherwise, with a calm that descends not from logic, but from something far older and wiser than thought. You may even find that this soul has influenced your choices, the way you show up for others, the tenderness you offer to children, animals, or strangers, the intuitive protection you feel for people you barely know. That deep sensitivity, it is not weakness. It is the echo of a bond that continues to shape your heart. And maybe without even realizing it, you've already honored them. Through acts of kindness no one saw. Through a promise you made to live fully, even when you didn't understand why. Through tears you allowed to fall without shame. Through courage you found in moments that broke you. This child is proud of you. They don't need you to do anything more. They don't require grand rituals or constant remembrance. Their connection to you is not dependent on action. It is built into your essence. It's as if they live in the spaces between your breath, watching your journey unfold with infinite patience, infinite love. But if you feel called to speak to them, speak. If you feel called to light a candle, write a letter, create something in their honor, do it. Not because you owe them, but because you are allowed to love them in your own sacred way. This connection is yours. Pure, eternal, unshakable. You are not imagining the soft presence at your side. It is real. It is love. And it has chosen to stay. Gate 3. The soul's message. Love that needs no words. Sagittarius. Some messages are not meant to be spoken. They are meant to be felt. And the soul of the child who never made it into this world carries exactly that kind of message. One too vast for language, too holy for sound. A message that transcends time, logic, and even grief. You may have asked yourself more than once, what were they trying to tell me? And perhaps you've strained to hear something specific, a name, a reason, an apology, a goodbye. But in the silence, what you found instead was presence. And that is the message. Their love is not conditional. It is not bound by who you are, or what you did or didn't do. Simply is. The spirit of this child, whether they came for a breath, or stayed only in the realm of dreams, has no resentment, no sorrow, no judgment. In fact, their message is the exact opposite of what your guilt may whisper in the dark. Their message is, thank you. Thank you for holding space for me, even if you didn't understand why. Thank you for feeling me, even when no one else did. Thank you for being open to love, even when it brought pain. Thank you for carrying my memory without needing proof that I was real. Sagittarius, you carry so much strength in your soul. But when it comes to this particular grief, you've often been unsure how to hold it. Society doesn't always allow space for mourning what was never born. And yet your heart has mourned anyway. You've had to grieve in secret. You've had to cry without explanation. And sometimes you've blamed yourself even though there was nothing to blame. But this soul never blamed you. They only loved you. And now, from the beyond, they want to give that love back. To wrap it around you in the form of quiet peace, gentle hope, and a strange, unexpected warmth that settles in your chest when you stop trying to understand and simply let yourself feel. I remember once guiding a Sagittarius client named Lucia. She had lost a pregnancy at just 7 weeks. Most people around her said, it was too early to be called a child, or, you'll have another one, as if loss had an expiration date. But to Lucia it was everything. I never heard her voice, she said. But I swear, I still feel like she talks to me. We sat in silence for a moment, then Lucia began to weep. Not out of pain but out of recognition. She doesn't want me to carry this sadness, she whispered. She wants me to be free. That's exactly it. This soul didn't come into your life to break you. They came to awaken something inside you. Compassion, depth, a softness the world may never fully see, but that becomes the wellspring of how you love others. Their presence may have introduced you to grief, but their message is a doorway to healing. Sometimes you'll feel them most when you're helping someone else. When you cradle a friend's pain with tenderness. When you instinctively comfort a child. When you offer compassion to someone the world has forgotten. These are the echoes of their influence. This is how they live through you. And on the days when you doubt yourself, when the world is too loud and your fire feels dim, they will find ways to remind you. A feather in your path. A melody you haven't heard in years. A name spoken on TV that startles your heart. A scent out of nowhere that brings back a memory not quite yours but deeply familiar. You may never hear their voice in the traditional sense, but their energy will always find a way. They are saying, I chose you because you are brave. I visit you not to reopen wounds, but to close them gently. You were never alone in your sorrow, and you are never alone now. Let go of what could have been. You are enough. Sagittarius, this is love without expectation. Love without shape or boundary. The kind of love that asks nothing from you. Only that you remember it exists, that you let it sit beside your soul, like sunlight on a winter morning. Quiet, steady, real. If you've ever felt the sudden need to place your hand on your heart and didn't know why, that was them. If you found yourself smiling in the middle of tears, that was them. If you've ever felt peace in the most unexpected moment, yes, that was them. You don't have to keep asking, "Are you still here?" They never left. And their message, this sacred echo from the spirit world, is not a cry for help. It's a lullaby, a reassurance, a whispered vow. I will always love you, in this life, and the next. And when you let that truth settle inside your bones, the healing begins. Gate 4. Turning loss into life, planting seeds of hope for yourself and others. Sagittarius, you were never meant to carry this pain forever. You were meant to transform it. That is what your soul came here to do. Not to stay wounded, but to become the healing. Not to be broken by loss, but to rise with it as part of your wisdom, your gentleness, your light. There's something alchemical about grief when it is held with compassion. It begins to shift, not disappear, but deepen into a quiet strength. And for you, this grief was never just about absence. It was about what could have been. The life unlived, the love unshared, the laughter that never echoed through your home. But now, that energy doesn't have to remain frozen in longing. It can be released into the world as a force for good. Can be given new life. How? Through choice. You can choose to love others more fiercely, because you know the fragility of life. You can choose to protect the innocence of children, because you've held the ache of one who never arrived. You can choose to speak truth into spaces that silence grief, because you remember what it felt like to suffer quietly. And in doing so, Sagittarius, you become a vessel for the soul who once chose you. Their message lives not just in signs or dreams, but in the way you live. I once met a Sagittarius named Reena. She had miscarried in her first year of marriage and had never told anyone, not even her husband's family. Years passed. The grief calcified into a quiet shame she didn't know how to dissolve. Then one day, she volunteered at a local shelter where she met a 12-year-old girl who had lost her mother. The girl reached for her hand without hesitation. "You feel like home," the child said. Reena cried for the first time in 10 years. It was in giving love to someone else that Reena's own pain began to soften. She started planting flowers in her garden, each one named in honor of a child lost somewhere in her family or community. Her home became a haven, a living altar to lost innocence and surviving love. That is the kind of transformation you are being called to now. You do not need to perform grand gestures or create foundations, unless your heart leads you there. Sometimes simply choosing to live with more softness, more gratitude, more presence is the offering. That in itself is the healing, because what was lost did not disappear. It became potential. And now, you are the guardian of that potential. You are the one who gets to choose what it becomes. A book, a garden, prayer, a breath of forgiveness, a moment of joy reclaimed in their honor. You get to decide how to carry the energy forward. This child's soul did not vanish, they expanded into you. Their love is now your intuition. Their purity is your compassion. Their dream is your courage to begin again. So yes, Sagittarius, cry when you need to. Sit with the ache when it rises. But then when you are ready, create. Write the letter you never sent. Light the candle. Plant the tree. Speak the name, even if it only lives in your heart. Because what you birth now, from this place of love and remembrance, is holy. And you don't have to do it alone. You are part of something much greater than one experience. You are part of a lineage of souls who are learning to turn pain into beauty, loss into meaning, silence into story. You are not the end. You are the bridge. And as you walk forward, lighter and more rooted than before, you'll notice something shift. The grief will no longer feel sharp. It will begin to feel sacred, like a prayer always being answered in ways you can't quite explain, but always recognize. That is the quiet miracle. You've become the very love you lost. And the child whose soul once touched yours, however briefly, now lives through every word of kindness you speak, every gentle hand you offer, every dream you dare to live fully, not in spite of your pain but because of it. Sagittarius, this is what it means to remember with purpose. To carry your story forward as a light for others. To say, this happened, I felt it, I grieved it, and now I rise from it. And in doing so, you heal not just yourself but generations before and after you. Because when one soul chooses to turn sorrow into service, the ripple is eternal. Conclusion. Sagittarius, if you've made it here, through the quiet ache, the invisible presence, the soul's whisper, and the transformation of grief into love, then you are not who you were when this journey began. You are softer now but stronger, more open yet more grounded. You've walked into the shadow of something unnameable, and instead of turning away, you listened. You allowed the silence to speak. You gave permission for your heart to feel what the world often denies. That loss is real, even when no one sees it. And love, when true, never ends. This wasn't just about a child you never met. This was about a soul agreement made before time. One that didn't rely on form or years or even words. It was always about connection. And now, that connection has become part of you. Not in sorrow, but in sacred purpose. The fire that guides you, Sagittarius, has always been more than ambition. It is the flame of truth. And the truth is, your love matters. Your loss matters. Your healing matters. You are not broken. You are blessed. And now, with every step you take forward, you carry a deeper peace. A knowing. A calm joy that says, I remember, and I choose to live with love. So take this message and let it echo wherever your journey leads. Speak it into the silence for those who still carry their grief alone. Remind them by simply being you that no love is ever wasted. No connection is ever lost. And even the smallest soul can leave behind a legacy of light. If this journey touched your heart, please like, share, or subscribe. Let this be a ripple of healing that reaches others who need it. And know this, your soul child is smiling. Not from sorrow, but from the joy of watching you live fully, bravely, and beautifully. Exactly as they hoped you would.